Welcome to another episode of the Alpha Letter Candidate Spotlight, the series that is all about giving job seekers the space to talk about their own experience in their own words beyond their resume and their job title. Will, I appreciate you joining me today. Can you give them a quick little pitch of your background, who you are, some of the work that you've been working on lately, and kind of the professional problems that you solve day to day as well?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Brian, for having me on the podcast. My name is William King, and I guess I lean more in the project management on network side and logistics. My background is I started off tier one, tier two support ages ago in IT, back when you really needed to know somebody to get into IT. And, I just kind of developed my career through that, got my Network Plus. I moved on to system administration, network engineering. And then from there, I moved up more project management, acquisitions, integrating new sites. Yes. So the problems that I like to solve and that I feel I'm heavily equipped for is integrations, especially when I worked in the healthcare field, we had to integrate new offices or offices that needed to be merged under a current domain or system. So we would migrate their applications, all of their files, their data. That, it was a little more simplified on the healthcare side. And then once I moved on into the financial sector, that was definitely magnified in a lot larger scale. And that was network design, the logistics, procurement of not only equipment, but software, then wrangling the telecom carriers into kind of servicing you at the best way that they can.
And there's a lot that I really want to unpack in kind of what you just said. But let's kind of start at the beginning of your professional career journey. You said on the systems and network side. What did those early days in those environments really look like?
Is definitely the Wild West of compliance. That probably there wasn't a whole lot. I mean, it's funny that I say that because there is a whole lot of compliance in healthcare. And so, I started off kind of working in sales, and I was doing IT related tasks on the side and could just never find the right role to hop into. And so, I ended up landing a position with a company called Austin Payne Associates, and we were in-house IT for Austin Payne, which I believe at the time had about 8 offices. And then we functioned as an MSP to other healthcare entities that our doctor was an owner or part of. And so that included surgical hospitals, ambulatory surgical centers, billing facilities, administration buildings. And so, as I worked in that role, the company expanded and those offices grew. And so by the time, all was said and done, I think we were supporting up to probably about 34 offices.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so it was a task. I was pretty much for all of our northern offices, and I would touch some of the southern offices as well, but I was tier 1 and tier 2 support. That was, on-site computers, desktops, printers, scanners, laptops, everything network and systems related. My director at the time, his name is Josh Wallard. He's a fantastic gentleman. He works for Pure Storage currently, but a little plug there. He had a very different philosophy for doing IT. And at the time, we were a smaller group. And so to function as an MSP, we were definitely a out of the frying pan into the fire type of group. And so there was a level of trust there to, if you do something bad, I'm going to beat you over the head. So it was kind of, you knew not to go into, the comms room and just start yanking cables out of the network rack. Yeah, there was a little bit of supervision, but, we had some good engineers above us to kind of help guide us and train us the correct way. Did I do some boneheaded things? Yes, but you learn from those things and you grow and you move on. But, it was fantastic. The thing is there's not, I've noticed in the IT space nowadays, there's not a lot of tier 1 and tier 2 roles that get to experience that kind of progression as far as IT goes, because, they're simply just like either remote hands or, they're sitting in front of a computer and they're resetting passwords or they're assisting with application support, where, ours was a full on crash course. It was like getting thrown into school, mid-semester or and you're learning all the courses as you go. And I don't think I would have gone back and done it any other way, because it definitely molded me, and it helped me learn faster.
It's interesting that you say that because I didn't even think about the crash course of people right now that are just sitting behind a computer doing password resets or need to enter their password so I can download some software or whatever it might be, right? It's all of this is becoming everybody just does tier one, then tier two, and that's it. They're not getting the exposures to a server room or to what a network might look like at a larger company, whether it's a just a regional or a national company.
Absolutely. But I see where kind of the problem lies. There is a lot of tier one now that works from home. And so they'll never have the ability to go into a server room. They'll never have the ability to learn how do I wire up this rack? How do I install a rack? How do I install my fiber panel, my patch panels, my switches, my firewall? How do I wire all this together? They're never going to have that experience. So, I definitely grew up. I'm not saying we were the only company that did
Yeah.
that. We knew of a couple other small MSPs in the Austin area that were working similarly with new hires, or you could say growing IT professionals. But it wasn't just the hands-on experience. It was the director saying, at the end of every year we had documentation December. And so he would dish out documentation every December, and you would be assigned systems, sites, and we'd go into Microsoft Visio, and we would have to design, I'm designing full scale designs and Visio of network racks and all of the components and the cabling, and what are our IPs schemes, and what are applications, and not only that, but how do the systems all work and function together? What does that integration look like? And so that that was the driving force behind actually learning everything, is you had to sit down and document it, and you had to show him. And then that was 2 weeks of documentation. And
Oh,
December was usually our slow months. And then he would say, we'd all gather together, and he'd say, all right, get the projector going. Now you got to stand up in front of your peers, and you have to present all of your documentation and explain exactly how these systems work to your peers. And that was, if you despise public speaking, that was definitely a rough thing to do.
and working with a bunch of IT people in a room, I'm sure that was always interesting to watch.
Oh yeah. Engineers can be very critical. I think we all kind of know that, and so you could feel the critique just staring at you. Yeah.
So, at what point or at what moment did you feel like there was a click for you that you started to understand your profession?
I would say probably once the there was a period of time where my director or an engineer, somebody would go with me, right? And then that was probably for like the first 4 to 6 months. And then I started to operate on my own, and I was sent out to these sites, just solo. And it really was sink or swim. And I think it was the moment that I realized, you know what? They're not going to help me, and nobody is coming to save me. So I've got to figure this out. Google became my best friend. There's a lot of Google engineers out there. There's no shame in saying that. If anybody remembers, Spiceworks was real big back in the day, and the Spiceworks forums were where everything was at. You didn't have to go out and create a script, because there was a script already for it on Spiceworks. You just copied and pasted. You adjusted it and pasted it and said it was your own. But, it's really just that moment of realizing, no, they're not going to come help me. I've got to figure this out. And it was through the trial of just realizing, if I don't get this done, I'm not going to look very competent, and just having to build that confidence. But I would say the moment that really solidified it was I was put over one of the ambulatory surgical hospitals. I was transitioned there, and I worked that for about a year, and I was their systems and network engineer and on-site tier 1, tier 2 of about 300 employees. And so I handled everything from all desktop, laptop, application related issues, scanner, printers, copiers, and then everything system and network related, from telecoms to equipment, access points. I pretty much ran the whole show there at the hospital. And so that was really the place that gave me the confidence and showed me, you know what, I can do this. I can do this at a scale at this level. I can be comfortable.
And you kind of led me into my next question there as well. And as you kind of moved in a more of a senior role, I'm going to call it, you started taking on more responsibilities, like you just mentioned there. How did the complexity change, and how did your role specifically change?
Well, more is expected. When you prove yourself, more is always expected. It's, IT is and most people understand this. It's a series of spinning plates. And when management finds out that you could spin a whole bunch of plates, they're like, "You know what? You could spin another plate." And so, more is added to your workload, and you show that you can accomplish those tasks as well. It's always complex. It just shifts. It shifts in different directions. Managing all those systems by ourselves and having full admin access to do that is complex. And then after about a year of being at the surgical hospital, we were purchased by a larger company called SCA, and we had to migrate and integrate the whole hospital systems into SCA's domain and network. And so you took something that was already complex, and now you added a layer of red tape in front of the complexity, because now you had to go through them to take care of anything at the hospital. And so that was, yeah, that made it a lot more difficult. That took it from a scale of like an 8 probably to an 11 and the part that really, I would say was the hardest part is the end user suffers, because they got used to being taken care of directly by you. And now when they're having issues, they're saying, "Hey, I need you to help me." And you say, "Well, I've got to go to this other team, and we've got to work through them to try to figure this out." And the time of having to wait and sit and wait, that definitely, that doesn't make people happier.
Yeah, and I mean, M&As are just interesting in itself, right? And like, I just went from a position where I just changed jobs as well, but I was always so used to the people that I can go talk to at my old job, right? And then now have to go learn the new way of doing things. I needed to learn how to use their VPN, their networks, their drives, where everything is.
Yep.
What is my lead time to get something if I need it? Like, those are all questions, and M&As are the same thing. When you're in those processes, what is that going to look like? Is ticketing going to be different? If I need your help, Will, can I go directly to you? Or am I going to just get told to go create a service ticket and then go back through the process and manually do that? It's something I never thought about within M&A, is just those little like aspects from, like you said, the end user that has to learn a whole new process too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That whole time period was extremely complex. The hospitals and the ambulatory surgical centers were purchased by SCA. And then our company that we worked for were purchased by a company called Pain Doctor out of Arizona. And so not only did we move from supporting our clinics, but we moved to supporting their clinics in Arizona. They had clinics in Dallas. They had clinics in San Antonio. And then we had all of our encompassing, healthcare facilities in the Austin area. And so our tent expanded, but it didn't get any easier, and so it's pretty easy helping, within an hour radius of yourself, because if you can't really fix something over the phone, it's like, okay, I'll get in my car and I'll drive over there. I'll fix it. But now you're remotely helping people in a city 3-4 hours away. That makes things a lot more difficult. And of course, I understand how the tier ones of the world feel now when they get a ticket and they're talking to this person, like, you know what, I can't fix this remotely. Somebody else is going to have to take this over.
Yeah. And let's just talk about healthcare networks too, just to begin with, how incredibly complex they are from every other industry. We can just start talking about HIPAA regulations in
Absolutely.
the other things that just come with that complexity. How does that look like for you as an engineer kind of working in that space? What was the biggest challenges for you there?
Data compliance is massive. You have to be very careful with data. PHI is a big risk, of somebody's PHI getting into the wrong hands. We had to schedule, and this ruffled feathers, but we had to schedule kind of like compliance checks to come into the healthcare facilities, and they were undercover, and they would go around and they would check for uh, if you were compliant, or if they were if somebody was breaking, HIPAA rules or laws. So, one time at the surgical hospital, the director himself printed out something that had PHI on, and he left it on the copier. He ran out for lunch and he
Oh,
forgot about it. And that HIPAA compliance agent came through, and they saw that paperwork and they dinged us on that. But the thing is, he never knew that that person was coming through. But it just goes to show, you always have to be ready. And PHI is a big deal. For healthcare in general, being, I guess you could say, CMS compliant. There's a lot of government regulations that come along with it. It doesn't just span your systems and networks and computers. It touches every aspect, right? Because
yeah.
if your EMR doesn't work and you can't bill correctly, if your coding isn't right, you don't get paid. So it's there's a lot of things you have to get right in order for a business to be successful in healthcare.
Yeah, and the healthcare is just a wild industry just because of the regulations. I mean, my insurer prior was UHC, and if you remember, UHC was
Oh yeah.
last year. I couldn't get a script filled because my pharmacy goes, I can't get a hold of UHC because their systems are down, and I'm like,
Hmm.
it's just in like it's such a everything talks to each other in a very interesting way, but everything is so guarded. This is coming from like a layman's perspective, right? And I
Yes.
have so much appreciation of the healthcare system, yes, because I don't want everybody to know my medical background
Hmm.
or issues, and it's a very interesting field to work in.
Yes. It is. It is. And if you're in IT, it's one of the hardest fields to work in. It truly is, because, you're dealing with all these complex systems, applications, networks. And on top of that, they may need you to go into the OR. So now you're in the changing room putting on a bunny suit and a cap and a mask, and you're going into an operating room, and you have to get this computer fixed before they have a surgery in 5 minutes, or the wireless is not working in there, or their EMR is not loading, and you're moving from the OR, and you're moving to PACU, and then you're moving to main nurse, and then you're moving, then you're teaching the nurses how to use iPads because they want to capture patient information. So you're going to wear a lot of hats if you move into IT in the healthcare field.
Yeah, no, thank you. I will leave the scrubbing in for surgeries for you. I have no desire to do that at all. In kind of your more recent role, you kind of you were the network program manager. What did that entail, and what did that mean in practice?
So when my last role operating in that capacity I worked heavily with our integrations and mergers and acquisitions team. And so the company that I worked for, and I'm not going to name them just because it was my last role, you just never know. And it was in the
Uh,
financial sector. So, I want to be respectful, but I would say the way that they operated was definitely what you would expect at an enterprise level of IT. And so there's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of checks and balances you have to go through to get things accomplished, or to make changes, or to even improve, kind of processes. But, I work directly with the integrations team. And at my time at this company, we probably integrated upwards of 200 different offices.
oh wow.
Yeah, over the course of about 6 years. And so when I came in 2018, we did not have a lot of processes in place, but they wanted to scale up their acquisitions, and they were backed by a very large investor. So and so over that time, I helped create those processes and standards for how we were going to make the process more seamless. And so, you would take an integration that would take, at least from a systems and network side, and it may take 6 months, and now you're trying to get it down to 4 months, and then you're eventually trying to get it down to 3 months. But you didn't always have the luxury of time on your side. We may have acquired a business, and they say we want to integrate them in a month. Yes. And so, you have to standardize across, software, equipment. You have to standardize across, was a big part of my position was telecom providers. And trying to get telecom providers to do what they're supposed to do is like herding cats. I mean, it really is. It really bad, and it is that bad for some of the largest of them, the Comcast, the Spectrum Enterprises, the Cox Business. And now imagine how much more unreliable they become at the regional level, because they don't have the same type of, I would say, customer heat on them as say some of the larger providers do. And so you may sign an order for service and then you don't hear anything from the provider for 2 months. And then you're calling them, you're emailing them, you're reaching out to them, and you don't get anything on the other end of the phone. And so it's, that was one of the biggest challenges. And then, we built a very reliable open source platform that would host all of our information. And so all of our telecom provider information, ISP contracts, IP schemes, pictures, network documentation, and we built that over the course of a few years, but that really ended up being the gospel of truth of how we operated on our networks and integrations side.
Did the documentation Decembers help you create all those documents and the procedures for those?
Oh, dude! Well, after you've gone through 3 or 4 documentation Decembers, everything is a piece of cake at that point. And so it really, it's just all time at that point. It's a tedious process, but somebody has to do it. And so,
Yeah.
and usually that person ends up being you, because nobody else wants to do it.
I am currently in my new role doing that process.
Yes.
It's always a fun challenge to have. So let's talk a little bit about the acquisitions and office integrations. You kind of alluded to some of the work that you were doing, but as you, as an IT professional and engineer, walk into a newly acquired business, what happens? Because there's a lot that has to unfold in the first couple weeks and even months, and hopefully you have months like you alluded there too. Right? You have computers that might be different. Some people might be, I don't know how much this happens anymore, but some people might be running Macs and you need to code to Windows, or like you said, harmonizing on internet providers or communications providers, or even Teams or Zoom, right? So kind of what does that look like for you?
You hit the nail on the head. By the time we got in our groove, we already had our stamp created, and we were
Mhm.
just trying to stamp. The office comes in, we're going to stamp you. You're all getting the current Windows machines that we're running. The offices would have to really make a cry for help to our team and tell them, listen, we want to use Macs. We don't want to use your Windows machines. Now, we did have a few offices that wanted to stay Mac only, and so we had to accommodate them. There were offices like that. If you're going to have a high producing office, usually they get what they want.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but you're really standardizing the process of migrating all their applications. We did acquire a lot of businesses at the beginning, and they had their own data centers and they were hosting their own data. And slowly but surely, then we started to migrate their data into the cloud. And now we're cloud hosting their applications. And now we're taking that stamp and we're going to now start stamping all of these other acquisitions the same way. And that was not only from an application standpoint, but now you have to teach those users. So when an integration happens, the integrations engineers and support staff, they're going into the offices after we finish the integration. They'll spend a week there and they're showing the users, the end users, okay, this is how you're going to use this application now. This is how you're going to do this now. This is how this new machine runs. This is how this new machine operates. But there's a lot of prep work that goes in before that, because there's discovery that happens before, the merger even closes. the acquisition even closes. And so, we're looking for contracts, for services, software. Do they have contract agreements with vendors? Are they using so, what does that look like? And there were many acquisitions where we're working through an MSP to get things done until the integration completes, and then you cut them loose after that. And so it was really building kind of a flow chart of the process of what that's going to look like, and setting the standards across, an office with this many users is going to get this firewall. An office with this many users is going to get these switches. This is a smaller office and they only have 5 users. Well, you know what? We don't need to install a 48 port switch. They're going to get a firewall that's got 8 ports, and we'll run 3 access points off of it. So I mean, there wasn't a one size fits all stamp, but we had, different stamps for different size offices, and the complexity that came along with that. Now, what made our company unique is we had regional IT support, but not every office has IT support, and so we're talking about 200 plus offices, in the United States and Canada, and then more offices over in the UK and Ireland, some in India. And so, you're talking about what does support look like post integration for that? You had users that just either did it themselves, or they called their local MSP and they had them take care of it, and now they're submitting a support ticket into ServiceNow. And how do you handle that process? And you're going to find yourself at that level, really fielding any request that comes in. You're trying to offer a white glove service to these end users. And, it really leaves a bad taste in their mouth whenever they're promised a whole lot and they're acquired, and then their experience is subpar.
So, on that kind of same line, how do you make sure that these disruptions are as seamless as possible to the end users?
When you're saying disruptions, do you mean
Like, we're
maybe
changing
like
computers or we're changing equipment. There might be a temporary outage, right?
yeah,
Usually those are probably going to be overnight, right? When there's limited, but like, you're coming in the morning, my Mac's right here, you're taking it away
yeah.
from me, right? Like, you're going to give me a Windows. How do you make those disruptions as easy as possible?
That all comes in the prep work. That all
Okay.
comes in the prep work. So we've set an integration date, and we are typically, that integration date's probably going to be, we start on a Friday and we have through a Sunday to work. And so, those users are like, hey, you're going home at noon. Happy early release day. Find a nice restaurant, go get a workout in, and so, our integrations team goes out. But we've already done all the prep work. So, I procured all of the equipment. It's already shipped to the office. It's sitting there. It's waiting. Laptops, network equipment, racks, UPS, you name it. Whatever they needed. We've purchased all the licensing for software for what they're going to need for their use case. All the laptops have been pre-imaged. They're ready to go. They're shipped to the office. And so, it's really, they leave, network comes down, new network goes up. We've created all the documentation for these integration engineers. So 95% of the time, they don't even need to talk to a network engineer.
Oh, wow.
We already documented in a form, step by step, exactly how they're going to go in and configure a firewall. If we haven't even, sometimes I would pre-configure a firewall if they weren't going to have the time, and I'd ship it out to them. But, 95% of the time, they already have all the instructions. And so, I mean, they're essentially an on-site network engineer without, having their CCNP, or their CCENT. They just go in, they pull up the document, they configure everything exactly how it is on paper, and the office is connected. Now they go in, they connect to the switches, they configure everything on the switch, exactly how all of the documentation is. So it's all in the prep work. If you prep your documents correctly, you're good. You're going to make this whole process just sail right by. And I can't even remember an integration where we didn't make the integration date. Everything was always completed, and the users would come in on Monday and they would have their new computers and they'd be shown how to use them. and they were guided through, for a few days on how things were going to work at the office. And it's a miracle that it was as smooth as it is, because I mean, you live in the same world that I do, and anything is bound to happen. I mean, we had we've had trucks crash into internet poles and take out the internet for days at offices. We had a truck crash through our office in Arizona,
Oh
crashed
my
through
God,
the
that's got to
office,
be
through
frightening.
through the office. It was the office was closed for 6 months as they had to re-renovate the office. We had offices catch on fire. Yeah. We've seen a number of things, from dumpster fires to unruly landlords. I've witnessed it all.
Yeah, I never even thought about now you have my mind spiraling of the crazy things that could have happened. Roof leaks into a building and it's just the
Absolutely.
right spot, right?
Yep.
Or I don't know, just you name it, right? It's all, I never even thought about half the stuff that you might have to deal with as
Yeah.
well.
Well, because we're monitoring a network, right? And so,
Yeah.
we see a network go down, and we're like, okay, telecom providers blip every now and
Yeah.
then. I mean, you'll lose service for a minute or two, and then it comes back up. And the service is down for 10 minutes. You're like, okay, something's wrong. And then you call the ISP, and they're like, well, it's not us. We show our line up to the tap. It's not us. And then you're like, okay, is the power out at the office? And then you called the director up there, and he's like, well, send you a picture. There's a truck, and it's inside of the office. So it took out the whole network closet. So
Oh my
yeah,
God.
yeah,
Yeah, we've also all lived through COVID too, and we know the crazy things that had happened in COVID
man,
when everybody was remote and home and internet
yeah.
home providers were at their capacity too. And yeah, just all the crazy stuff.
From a logistical standpoint, COVID was extremely difficult from a procurement and logistical standpoint, because you typically didn't have people in office. If you did, it was skeleton crews. So we had to have a lot of our network equipment. We still did acquisitions, mergers and acquisitions, but I had to have it shipped to an engineer or an employee, and they had to bring it into the office
Oh,
for an integration. I remember I shipped. So I was told, this is one of the offices in Chicago, and we were renovating a floor, and I was shipping equipment there, and I was told there was a front desk person for this floor. And so I had all the equipment shipped. It showed it was delivered. My engineer gets there 2 days before the integration, and all of the equipment is gone. So we're talking about $8,000 worth of equipment that walked up and grew legs and walked away. And so
did you end up finding it?
no, nobody ever found the
Ugh.
equipment. So we filed a claim, we reordered equipment, we had it expedited. Fortunately for us, they had more equipment, so they were able to get it there very quickly. But yeah.
And I mean, just the COVID issues that we had too. We had logistical issues. We had shortages coming out of China because of plant
Mm-hmm.
closures.
Yep. Oh
I
yes.
could remember how crazy it was to go buy a computer at the time,
Yep.
or if you needed a monitor, there was supply chain delays there too. So
Yep.
just I couldn't imagine standing up in office and trying to make sure that you had equipment.
We had generally operated off of 1 to 2 firewalls that we use,
And
small to medium size, large size office. And then when COVID hit, we didn't really see any issues until about 2021. And that's when you definitely saw the supply chain problems, and range of firewalls then went up to 4 to 5 different models, because they didn't have the ones that we chose to standardize with. Same thing with access points. We had one set of access points that we used. And then during COVID, we had to then start sourcing 3 to 4 different types of access, all the same manufacturer, but we had to find backups to the backups, because then your backups ran out, and then you're like, okay, well, who has access points? And so that was an exciting time. That's sarcasm.
knock
That was
knock
not an
on
exciting
wood,
time.
we do
Yeah.
not relive that
Yeah.
experience at all. So.
Yeah.
So, in your professional experience, you've had some great accomplishments as well. You have reduced operating costs, you've reduced telecom spend. How do you even approach some of those processes?
That really comes through understanding your environment, and ultimately understanding the standard you want to set across your organization. If you don't have a standard, you can't decrease cost, because there's no end goal, right? And so once you have a standard and you understand, okay, this is the goal that we're aiming towards from a systems and network and software perspective,
Mhm.
then you can reach out to your vendors and start to negotiate with them. And so, you're working on strategies for new MSAs. How do we get costs down? Is it feasible to move to a different manufacturer? There's always new up and comers in the hardware game. And so they're hungry to get that business. And so the Cisco Meraki's of the world, they have to watch out because the Palo Altos, the Fortinets, they're coming. They're coming for your market share because, I have disdain for the licensing structure of Cisco Meraki. Their products are fantastic. Their remote monitoring and their GUI is very simple to use, but it's so monopolized and they know it. And they're like the network mafia. Cisco is. So they're gonna make you pay. They get an offer. They got an offer that uh so we ended up refusing that offer, and we went with a different manufacturer. So we lowered our costs there. But really on the telecom front, you got to understand your markets. You got to understand the market and the time frame that you live in. In COVID, it was very simple and easy to decrease telecom spend. It's not like I'm playing, what I did, but I understood, what commercial's taking a hit right now. The ISPs are suffering.
Mhm.
Oh, you're willing to come down 40% on your 100 meg circuit? Okay. All right. Let's write an agreement for 10 sites. Now, what are you willing to come down? Oh, you're willing to come down 60% on 10 sites. Now you've just decreased your monthly spend by $5,000. And that's just in 1 month. And that's
Yeah, to
just 5
compound that
sites.
over a year.
That's
Yeah,
just yeah, that's just 10 sites. So you reevaluate your providers and you look to see strategically who can I work with that's going to provide me the best support experience. And a lot of people don't think about that is a lot of companies, a lot of, I would say, directors, CTOs, engineers, is somebody may be offering you a cheaper service. What does their support look like if you get locked into a 3-year contract? What does that look like? So now you have terrible support and a subpar network for the next 3 years. It doesn't matter how good your network is and your equipment and your software and your licensing. If your data pipe is always having issues and you're always constantly down, you're losing money. Yeah.
So, right now, let's just kind of go through a scenario. Kind of like there is a major outage in one of your offices right now, right? And
Okay.
hypothetical or an issue, whatever problem you want. How does your mindset change, and how do you try to troubleshoot the issue?
First things first. Usually you're going to see a network monitoring alert before anybody calls in. That's the first thing that you're going to see. So you see that come in, then you'll typically reach out to somebody on site, and you'll ask them, "Hey, do you have power?" "Oh, you have power." "Okay. Can I get you to go walk into the network room?" Because now you're doing remote support with an
Yeah.
end user. A lot of offices don't have on-site support.
So
And
are
so
you
now
calling
you're
them
having
like via are you calling them via mobile, or are you
Yeah,
calling them
absolutely. Yeah, through
yeah,
through
okay.
cell
Because
phone, cell phone to cell
they don't
phone.
have power. If they don't have
Yeah, so
power,
you're
a
not you
VoIP
can't
system's
call
not
them
gonna be
on
up.
on their desk phones. Yeah, so you're calling them on their cell phone. All right, you have an iPhone? Okay, let's do a FaceTime call.
Yeah.
Show me your network rack. You got your network rack in front of you. Point your camera at the firewall. We see lights on it. It's got power. Let's locate the ISP modem or router. Okay. Oh, it's got lights. It's got power. Okay. So seems like everything's good on our side. Next step, let's call the service provider. Let's figure out what's going on there. Let's get and then you have a trouble ticket that's opened up. We had created inside of our network operating system to where whenever our network monitoring software had a down, it would automatically open up a ticket in ServiceNow. So you automatically had a ticket, and it would automatically get assigned to the user group or the networks group, and then that gets funneled down from there. And so that takes, automation is your friend. And so,
Yeah.
it takes away me, if I'm troubleshooting all this and it's like, I've completely forgot to make a ticket. Oh, it's already there. It's already created. So now I'm opening it up. I'm going in. I'm documenting. And, honestly, I think a lot of more enterprises are moving in that direction where they want to automate. And, with AI really now being developed into most applications, CRMs, not just across IT, it's spanning across everywhere. You're going to see a lot more automation and systems being able to talk to each other without it costing your business $100,000 to integrate two systems together. When I worked in healthcare, if you transition to a new EMR, but you needed your new EMR to talk to some other software, sort of third party vendor or billing platform, well, guess what? You're paying a lot of money for them to integrate that software, and you're talking about $150,000, $200,000 quotes, all the risk that comes along with it. Now we're pushing up PHI across, to somebody else. Very high risk. I mean, you have applications like Zapier, or Make.com that are connecting applications and integrating them. And it's only automation is only going to improve.
Yeah.
Especially as AI has moved in, it's not going to take a full stack developer to do that now. And I
Oh,
think that's where the industry is moving.
I have an automation on my iPhone that every morning at 6:30 in the morning, it sends me a text message of what my day looks like, when my first meetings are, everything. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it's just, this is something that anybody with, I don't know at what point they started creating this, but if you have an iPhone, you can start creating some of this. And it's becoming a lot easier for people. I'm not technical by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm able to figure this out.
Yeah. I think the next generation of IT is positions are going to be less pigeonholed, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
Because the way that we've moved through the internet age, with Google at your fingertips, you don't necessarily 100% need um, to have a million certifications. You can have one or two, and then you can operate in that space, and then you can learn on the fly. It's no different than when, you know, uh, 13 years ago when I got thrown into IT, uh, with really just a little bit of experience. It's the same model, just at a larger scale. And there's going to be a lot of people that won't like that. But that's, if you just say, I'm just a network engineer and that's all that I am, there's going to be a lot of good roles that you get passed up on. Because if you go in and they see that you're competent and you can do your role, and they're going to say, well, you know what, can you also do this? And then you're going to be expected to do that. And then you're going to say, oh, well, this is kind of part of that. So now we need you to do this. And then you're going to expand. And, when you get up in those senior roles, you're not just in one lane. You're operating across all areas. And if an executive calls you and says, hey, I have an issue with this, you're not going to say, well, you know what? I need you to put in a ticket. You're going to have to wait for the next help desk person. You're going to get
Yeah.
reamed by your CTO. You're going to stop what you're doing, and you're going to, you're going to take the call, and you're going to figure out what needs to be done. All of it's pretty simple at the end of the day. It's really just about taking the time to provide a good user experience.
And I completely agree. I think the future, I also run a blog as well, and I don't think we're going to have career ladders. I think we're going to have lattice boards, right? And I think you're going to see
Yep.
a lot more zigging and zagging throughout careers. And I'm all for it, right? I do not want to be a one trick pony in my professional career. I think we're in this really fun time in the world that there's so much we could be learning so quickly right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you've got DevOps. You've got net devs, you've got all kinds of developers. I mean, you can be a network engineer and you can go open up Codex and go build a script. It's not like I'm not stating the obvious. Who needs to go and learn PowerShell now? I mean, I'm just being honest. You can go and have AI write you a PowerShell script to do whatever you need to do. And so that, to me, that removes a lot of the complexity and honestly the time the time consuming task that it would take to actually go and do that, and so that frees you up. That frees you up to actually go and work on things that are more important.
So at this point of your career, how much is technical? How much is business?
30% is technical. I'd say 70%
Yeah.
is business. 25 to 30% is technical, because really it's
Okay.
about the relationships. The business is like this precious, eagle egg, and you have to protect it. And you've got to put all of your time into protecting it, but the technical details of how you have to protect it are, it's very small. It's not there's not a lot of complexity to it. But you know what? That comes in experience. That comes with, having 10 plus years in the field. And when I'm not the only one. There's a lot of Wills out there. They don't have my name, but there's a lot of guys out there that you operated in. I'm the jack of all trades. You got thrown into the IT world and you had to do it all. You had to do tier 1, tier 2. There was nobody else there to do systems. There was nobody else there to do exchange administration. There was nobody else there to build and administer via IP 500 phone systems. So, I mean, when you do all that, there's really nothing you can't do. You know what I mean? It really
Mhm.
opens up and expands your horizons, and you understand there's no system too complex for me. If anybody has worked in via IP 500 or the old ShoreTel systems, all of these new VoIP systems are extremely easy. So yeah, it's a cakewalk.
So now that you're on the market, you're out there looking, what type of problems are you interested in solving? What type of environments are you looking for? Kind of what's next for you? What are you hoping to get in your next opportunity?
I love working with teams. I mean, I've worked in those roles where you're a little more solo. It gets lonely.
Mhm.
I'm a people person, and so I'd love to work on a team. I love teamwork. And then I like seeing the bigger picture. So, being part of that outcome, refining and improving processes. There's just something about that I get a lot of joy out of. And then, really showing you're an asset. That's always it's always made me feel content. Is when you're able to show that you're an asset and that you not only can provide what they think you can, but you can move outside of that box and you can provide a whole lot more. So really
And
just working on a team, really project management is what I love to do. And so project management, process improvement, I worked with our accounting as well. And so budgets, procurement, decreasing cost, how do we allocate our spend? Those kinds of things.
so really not just y- kind of where you're saying that 70% of your time sometimes is in the business world too, working across different teams with even end businesses and not just the end users too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what type of environments are you looking for? Remote, hybrid, in person? Kind of what's that look like for you? Because that is a big aspect nowadays too.
It is. It really depends on the role. I worked when COVID hit. From that point on, I worked remotely from home. Some people can't do it. But we're on big calls all throughout the
Yeah.
day. And you're talking, you're communicating with people. I actually found myself more productive being working remotely. When you're at the office, people want to talk.
So
People,
many distractions.
there's a lot of distractions, dude. Janice brought cookies in, and everybody wants to eat cookies and talk. No, everybody wants to gather, and I'm not saying those things aren't nice, but you don't realize how much of your time that it takes up. Oh, they're having a coffee bar on the
Yeah.
break room floor today, and you spent 2 hours up there talking. Nobody bats an eye at it, but I mean, when I worked remote, I woke up pretty early. I take the kids to school. I get home, I'm on my laptop at 7 in the morning working,
Mhm.
and then sometimes not getting off till 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. And so, you can get a lot done. You can be productive. I do know there is a sentiment out there amongst a lot of executives and owners, and they're saying people can't work remotely, but that's not true. People can work remotely, but you're going to have people that are going to screw off either way, whether they're working
Yeah.
remotely or whether they're in an office. People are going to find, if they don't want to work, they're not going to work. And so they're going to find a way to not work. I mean, I have memories of catching people during the workday asleep in the bathrooms. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, people will find a way to slack off, and so I would prefer remote. Hybrid's nice. I mean, going in 2 days a week. A lot of some hybrids 1 and 4, some hybrids 2 and 3.
Yeah.
But it really just depends on the role. If it's a great role, I'd go in. I'd go in full time.
And so for those possible hybrid, kind of where are you looking at? What kind of geographic area are you thinking right now?
So I'm in Northeast Houston at the moment, east of Lake Houston. So for anybody that's out there that's from H Town and they where Lake Houston is at, I'm just east of there in a town called Crosby. So hybrid, being, I mean, I could say spring, Humble, even when you just come on the other side of the lake, now you're kind of like North Houston area between the Beltway and 610 and North Houston. Those areas are going to be a lot easier to get to for me for a hybrid role. I mean, with gas the way it is, I don't even know if it's worth driving across Houston. I'd just be going to work just to pay for gas.
Yeah, I just filled up my truck the other day and I'm like, I don't think I've ever put this much money into my truck before.
Yes, I spent $90 filling up my truck 3 days
I was
ago.
at
It was
75 and I have a
yeah,
midsize. So
yeah, it was
yeah.
painful.
Another plug for remote work.
Yeah, yes.
Well, Will, I appreciate your time. Before we depart, is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
You know what? I was thinking about this. I would just say, if you're new to IT, you're probably in a tier 1 role. You got to understand how to work with difficult people. You're in that role, you're going to see across the board anybody and everybody you could work with, all personality types. You're going to have people that tell you, I don't want to do what you're asking me to do. You're going to have people that are thrilled to help them. You just got to get used to it. But the more open and less frustrated you could be with that role, more opportunities are going to open up to you. Your directors are going to see that, your VPs. Just stick with it. And if you get an opportunity, it may not be what you want. If you get an opportunity to move into something a little bit different, take it, because that's only going to lead to the next door, and it's only going to lead to the next opportunity. And before you know it, your exposure is going to have grown, and now you're going to have mid-level and seniors looking at you and saying, well, you know what, they did this, and now they've done this, and now they've shown that they can do this. So it's as you get older, those opportunities are only going to grow, and your possibilities are going to expand. So that's what I got.
And that is a very solid advice there, Will. So I definitely have nothing more to add to that because I think that was a really good advice there. So,
Well, I appreciate you having me on the pod, Brian.
and
It was
Will, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you telling us your story. And for everybody listening, if you want to learn more about Will, feel free to reach out to him on LinkedIn. I'll make sure I tag his LinkedIn profile in the show notes. And thank you for tuning in this week.
Thanks, everyone. Peace.